Chapter 1. At the class reunion, Lisa handed me her phone and said there was something I should see. I didn't think much of it and clicked to open it. As I looked up, Colin's post from 2 minutes ago appeared on the screen. In the end, I still couldn't marry the person I most wanted to marry. Beneath the words was a photo of a marriage certificate. Compelled by some strange impulse, I pulled out my own phone, only to see that Colin's posts were limited to the past 6 months. At that moment, a cold feeling crept into my heart, and the joy from receiving my own marriage certificate earlier today vanished without a trace. A flood of sadness and frustration overwhelmed me. Looking around at the noise in the room, I couldn't even muster the strength to cry out loud. "Zoe, give me back my phone," Lisa said cheerfully, stretching her hand toward me. At that moment, I finally understood. She was telling me that she was the one Colin truly wanted to marry. After Lisa left, my phone rang. I stared at the name on the screen for a long time, so long that the ringing stopped before I realized. The phone rang again. I excused myself and left the gathering. Out on the busy street, watching the people passing by, I smiled as tears began to fall. Once I had calmed down, I called Colin back. "Zoe, why didn't you answer the phone?" Colin's irritated voice came at me from the other end. I quietly listened to him rant. When he finally ran out of steam, I said, "Colin, let's get a divorce. A couple who gets divorced right after getting married. You probably wouldn't find another like us in the whole world. Stop joking around. When are you coming home?" Colin didn't take it seriously, thinking I was just teasing. "I'm not coming back. Let's meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow to finalize the divorce." Colin finally lost his patience. "Do whatever you want," he said before hanging up. That night, I stayed in a hotel, crying as I deleted everything related to Colin. Chapter 2. As expected, love that is forced has no meaning. The next day, I waited until 10:30 a.m., but Colin was nowhere to be seen. Just as I was about to call him, Lisa sent me a photo. In the photo, Colin was playing with my cat, Daisy, while Lisa, wearing the clothes I had just bought, smiled at him. The atmosphere between them was just right. The phone rang for a long time before someone answered. "Hello." It was Lisa's voice. I closed my eyes and, with a trembling voice, said, "Let Colin answer the phone." Just a moment. Lisa's tone was calm. "Hello?" After a while, Colin's lazy voice came through. "Come to the civil affairs office right now. We're getting a divorce." Watching the couples registering, I once again felt pathetic. Colin said nothing on the other end, just as I thought something was wrong with my phone. He scoffed and sneered. "Zoe, playing hard to get is fine for a while, but don't overdo it." I heard the impatience in his voice and repeated myself. "If you don't come, I'll file for a contested divorce. If it doesn't work the first time, I'll do it again. This divorce is happening." Realizing I was serious, Colin grew angry and embarrassed. "What's your problem?" "I'm not causing trouble. I just think this marriage is meaningless." "Colin, I admit I was the one who chased you, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me like this. If you don't love me, you shouldn't have married me." Colin's voice slowed, filled with gritted teeth. "How did I mistreat you? Be clear." I didn't bother to argue further and simply told him I'd be waiting at the civil affairs office. Colin arrived quickly. As soon as he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my hand. "Come home with me." I didn't pull away, just looked at him and smiled. "You disgust me." Colin, who had been pampered his whole life, had never been treated like this. He grabbed my chin harshly, his eyes filled with fury. "Do you even know what you're saying?" I grabbed his hand and asked instead, "Did you post something on your moments yesterday? Is Lisa lying on our marital bed right now? Do you even love me?" My barrage of questions made Colin frown. After a long pause, he finally said, "If that's how you want to think, I can't stop you, but I can promise, I've never betrayed you." I looked at him, my heart growing colder by the second. "You don't need to make any promises to me. Let's part ways amicably. The more you cling to this, the more I'll look down on you." Colin's pride kept him from saying anything too humble. He looked straight at me and said coldly, "Fine, I'll give you what you want. Just don't regret it later." "I will never regret it." Colin let go of me and drove off to get the documents. 2 hours later, we walked out of the civil affairs office. Colin asked when I would pick up my things from the new house. Throw them away. I don't want any of it. And Daisy? Colin still wouldn't give up. Give her to someone else. I left those words behind and got into a taxi to leave. From that day on, Colin completely disappeared from my life. Chapter 3. When news of my divorce spread, everyone around me said I was heartless. To shut them up, I posted screenshots of Colin's moments and the photo Lisa had sent me on my social media. I thought they would have nothing left to say, but they quickly turned around and defended Colin. I deactivated all my social media accounts, and life gradually became quieter. A week later, I agreed to a company transfer and moved to another city for a new start. My father was furious about my divorce, feeling humiliated. No matter how much I tried to explain, he wouldn't listen, even going so far as to say I was no longer his daughter. Old friends also criticized me for being too dramatic. In their eyes, someone as ordinary as me should have been grateful to marry someone like Colin. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I lived alone in the new city for 3 years until I found true love again. Andrew was a pastry chef. He wasn't the type for sweet words, but he understood me deeply. He knew when I was cold or sad. He respected and truly got me. I was the rose he nurtured in the palm of his hand. And with him, I was happy. This year, how about I take you home to meet my parents? I asked, casually mentioning my thoughts while eating the lunch Andrew made. He gently wiped a crumb from the corner of my mouth, smiled, and nodded. Then I'll have to trouble our Zoe. Don't mention it. Because of Andrew, I no longer feared love or marriage. 3 years was enough time for my father to soften his heart. When he saw how well Andrew treated me, my parents started to accept him. But just when Andrew and I were about to have our wedding, Colin's family reappeared. His older sister, Clara, asked to meet with me, saying there was something important to discuss. Not wanting to get involved with them again, I declined. I thought it would just be a minor episode. But when Andrew's work started encountering setbacks, I began to suspect that someone was pulling strings. Zoe, meet with me. I'll give you the answers you're looking for. Clara's tone was that of someone used to being in control, filled with pressure. I went to the restaurant and looked at Clara across the table. Memories of those unbearable times 3 years ago flashing back, along with the contempt she had shown me. We sat across from each other, neither of us speaking. Once the waiter left, Clara pulled out a card and placed it on the table. This is 1,000,000 yuans. I don't have any other request. Just that you return to Colin. I won't oppose your relationship anymore. What? It felt like I had just heard the most absurd joke in the world. Clara looked at me, a faint hint of disgust in her eyes. Because he's sick. Very sick. Ever since he found out you were getting married, he's become even more unhinged. His emotions are spiraling out of control. From Clara, I learned that Colin knew everything that had happened to me in the past 3 years. She said Colin loved me so much that he was losing his mind. When you left without a word, Colin couldn't find you, so he locked himself in the new house and refused to eat or drink. It wasn't until I realized something was wrong that I managed to pull him back from the brink of death. After he found out where you were, he kept watching you from a distance. If it weren't for the fact that you're getting married, his condition wouldn't have worsened so suddenly. Hearing Clara say this, I finally understood why everyone had been calling me heartless. Colin had painted himself as a deeply devoted lover. So naturally, I became the heartbreaker in everyone's eyes. Zoe, I don't know what happened between you 3 years ago, but even if he's made unforgivable mistakes, hasn't he suffered enough? Do you know? When he realized you were gone, he cried and begged me to help him find you. He didn't do anything, just lived surrounded by your things. Even now, your new home is untouched, kept just as it was. The Colin she was describing didn't sound like the arrogant Colin I remembered. I don't love him anymore, so I'm sorry. I love Andrew now. I grabbed my bag and was about to leave when Clara quietly added, Aren't you afraid something might happen to Andrew? Shouldn't you be afraid something might happen to Colin? If you so much as lay a finger on Andrew, I promise your brother will wish he were dead. With that threat, I glanced at Clara, whose face had turned pale with fury, and smiled as I walked out of the restaurant. Chapter 4. Just when I thought my life was finally returning to normal, I ran into Colin at work. He had come to the company as a new shareholder to evaluate operations. Standing in the corner of the conference room, I held my breath as I watched Colin get closer and closer. The past 3 years had completely changed him. He looked at me with such calm eyes that it felt like we were nothing more than strangers. Seeing him like this, he didn't seem nearly as neurotic as Clara had made him out to be. Once the meeting began, someone asked Colin why he had decided to invest in the city. "Because my beloved is here," he said, without any context. As soon as the words left his mouth, the room filled with gasps of surprise. A few female employees looked visibly heartbroken. I stared at Colin, feeling utterly disgusted by his show of affection. "Are you married?" my boss, manager, cautiously asked him. I was. "But we got divorced." Colin lowered his head, smiling with what seemed like helplessness. Seeing him look so pitiful, it was no wonder my parents and friends all thought I was ungrateful. After Colin's statement, the room fell silent, everyone suddenly fearful of saying something that might upset him. Colin glanced at me casually and lightened the mood. "Don't worry, I believe I'll win her back." "Of course! With someone like you, it's only a matter of time before she returns." Everyone chimed in with nervous laughter. I couldn't tell if Colin was doing this on purpose, but that was when I noticed the ring on his left hand's ring finger, the same couple's ring that had only cost 500 yuan, the one Colin had once despised and wanted to throw away. At that moment, Colin's assistant entered and handed him a box. As soon as I heard the familiar sound of a cat meowing from inside, I froze in place. Daisy, the cat I had rescued and raised. Colin had been upset with me many times over Daisy, as he had never wanted me to keep her. "It seems Daisy has a real liking for designer Zoe," Colin said with a smirk. Glancing at me, my thoughts snapped back to reality. Looking at Daisy now curled up by my feet, I couldn't help but pick her up. Daisy's sudden attachment made everyone's imaginations run wild, but I shoved her back into Colin's arms and returned to my seat. Chapter 5. As soon as lunchtime arrived, Andrew called to tell me he was waiting outside the office. When I took the elevator downstairs, I happened to run into Colin and his group coming in. I mechanically greeted them and quickly retreated to a corner, trying to blend into the background. "Zoe, is your fiancé here to bring you lunch again?" the manager asked with a smile, breaking the silence in the elevator. "Yes," I mumbled, keeping my head down, aware of Colin's gaze and trying to make myself as invisible as possible. The sudden tension from Colin made everyone too afraid to speak. I pulled out my phone and started chatting with Andrew to distract myself. Once the elevator doors opened and the group had left, I dashed out to meet Andrew. "Slow down." I opened the lunchbox and, seeing the delicious meal, couldn't help but tease. "Andrew, you're so domestic." "What can I say? You're picky with your food." Andrew pinched my cheek playfully. When I used to be with Colin, no matter how much I lowered myself, he remained indifferent. Now, looking back, I realize it wasn't love. He just thought I was easy to control. After lunch, we agreed to go try on wedding dresses after work. I was heading back to the office for a quick nap when I ran into Colin in the elevator again. I kept my head down, pretending not to recognize him, and was about to step out when Colin suddenly grabbed me. Before I could react, he had me pinned against the elevator wall, his eyes red with frustration. "Zoe, you're really something. How am I not better than him? You'd rather live a hard life with him than be my wife. Let me go." Smack! Colin wouldn't loosen his grip, so I slapped him across the face, furious. "He's 100 times better than you. The most important thing is, we love each other. That's something you will never be able to compete with." Colin stood frozen, his head tilted to the side. When he looked back at me, his eyes were filled with a dangerous, bloodthirsty rage. My heart sank, terrified that Colin might do something reckless. I pushed him away with all my strength and ran as fast as I could. Chapter 6. Because of him, I couldn't focus at work, and I didn't even dare go to the break room. On the way to the bridal shop with Andrew that evening, I finally brought up the idea of resigning. "What's wrong? Is someone bothering you?" Andrew, always attentive, noticed that something was weighing on my mind. I shook my head, not wanting Colin to ruin the mood while we were on our way to try on wedding dresses. "It's nothing serious. I'll tell you all about it later when we get home." Inside the bridal shop, as I looked at myself in the mirror wearing a wedding dress, I felt a bit dazed. Colin had once postponed our wedding, using work as an excuse. Back then, I thought I'd never get the chance to wear a wedding dress. But Andrew changed all that, filling the void and making me feel cherished. "You look beautiful," Andrew said, grinning goofily. "You should try on a suit too." After Andrew went in to change, I turned around and suddenly saw Colin standing ominously by the entrance. Startled, I quickly looked away. When I glanced back again, Colin was gone. That night, I told Andrew everything that had happened over the past few days. His face grew serious as he listened. "Zoe, let's get married tomorrow." Sensing Andrew's emotional reaction, I quickly tried to calm him. "Don't worry, I did have feelings for him before, but now he's nothing more than a stranger to me. I'll hand in my resignation tomorrow. Colin doesn't love me. He just can't accept that I no longer care for him. He's always been arrogant. Andrew, you're amazing. So don't be afraid I'll stop loving you." I hugged Andrew tightly, hoping to reassure him. Chapter 7. The next day, I took the day off and went with Andrew to get our marriage certificate. This time, standing beside me wasn't Colin, the one who had left me to be with someone else, but Andrew, the one who truly cherished me. Andrew held our marriage certificate and even posted a public announcement on his social media for everyone to see. All the wounds I had suffered in the past were being healed, one by one, by him. When I got back to work, I handed out wedding candies to my colleagues and submitted my resignation letter to the manager. "Zoe, are you leaving to settle down?" The manager's probing question made me a little uncomfortable. "Yes, my husband loves me very much, so I want to take a break from work and focus on preparing for the wedding." I couldn't reveal the real reason for quitting, so I had to make something up. The manager's expression was complicated. He didn't acknowledge my words but simply told me to go see Colin. Realizing this was all Colin's doing, I grabbed my resignation letter and stormed into his office. "Manager." I couldn't stop her, the assistant said cautiously, watching Colin carefully, afraid he'd lose his temper again. "Get out!" Colin flipped the papers on his desk to the floor in a fit of rage. After the assistant left, Colin pointed to the wedding candy on the floor, glaring at me with fury in his eyes. "Did you go get your marriage certificate yesterday?" "That's right. Would you like some wedding candy to bring you good luck?" "Mr. Colin, I still have a few more in my bag," I responded boldly. This was as good as twisting the knife in the wound. "Zoe, you're despicable." Colin suddenly grabbed me by the neck, flying into an inexplicable rage. Seeing Colin on the verge of losing control, I had no time to think. I kicked him in the groin as hard as I could. Colin collapsed to the floor in pain. I threw the resignation letter on top of him and walked back to the office to pack my things. As I stood at the company entrance, looking back at the place I had worked for the past 3 years, I felt a twinge of reluctance in my heart. Chapter 8. I wasn't sure if Colin had been injured or not, but according to my former colleagues, he left the company the next day. Life gradually returned to normal, and I became busy planning the wedding. Soon, Colin was completely out of my mind. Because of Clara's previous meddling, Andrew often faced challenges at work, but even when things didn't go well, he never wanted me to worry. "Andrew, why don't you open your own dessert shop?" I said, offering him the money I had saved over the past 2 years. "If I use this money to open the shop, you won't be able to design the house you want. Didn't you always dream of having a beautiful balcony?" Andrew gently ruffled my hair, his smile filled with a trace of helplessness. I couldn't resist poking his dimple. "We can wait a bit on the house renovation. You're so talented. I'm sure you'll make the money back quickly." "Zoe, thank you." We exchanged a warm smile. After securing the shop, Andrew became incredibly busy with work. He had always taken care of me, but now that I had resigned and was at home, I began learning to cook. Although my food didn't taste great, Andrew still seemed to enjoy every bite. Our life together was simple, but this was exactly the kind of peaceful, everyday life I had always craved. The wedding preparations went smoothly, and before I knew it, the big day had arrived. I thought everything would go according to plan, but I never expected Colin to play dirty tricks. Chapter 9. He used his financial power to cause chaos at the wedding, then attacked Andrew and, in the confusion, drugged me. When I woke up, I found myself locked in a small villa. I woke up, parched and dehydrated. Opening my eyes, I looked around the dimly lit room, feeling a chill run down my spine. I held my head and got out of bed, intending to leave, but the sound of footsteps nearby startled me. The memories before I lost consciousness rushed back, and seeing Colin approaching me step by step, I grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and threw it at him. Colin, you're a maniac. Zoe, I'm sorry. Colin dodged the lamp and suddenly apologized, his voice soft and tender, sending shivers down my spine. The Colin I once knew was awful, but never this twisted. For the first time, I couldn't figure him out. Colin, let me go, or I'll call the police. I stared at him, trying to appear calm. Even though the room was dim, Colin's intense gaze was suffocating. He remained unmoved by my threat. After what felt like forever, he let out a low, eerie laugh. Zoe, I've already taken your phone. I'm curious, how exactly do you plan to call the police? Something was seriously wrong with him. I forced myself to stay calm and tried reasoning with him. Colin, let's part on good terms. I don't love you anymore. What you're doing, kidnapping and illegal detention, it's a crime. Why do this? It's okay. You loved me once, and you can love me again now. He pulled open the curtains, turned back to me, and smiled brightly. The sunlight poured into the room as Colin looked me up and down, nodding in satisfaction. You look beautiful in a wedding dress, Zoe. Looking at the increasingly erratic Colin, I felt a chill run down my spine. I don't love you. I love Andrew. No matter how well you treat me, nothing can change that. As soon as I said this, Colin's face darkened, and he lunged forward, grabbing me by the neck. He couldn't bear to hear those words. Zoe, I suggest you stop saying things like that, or I won't hesitate to drag both of us to hell. And then Andrew, that man, won't be in our way anymore. Fearing he might strangle me, he quickly loosened his grip and then, almost groveling, apologized softly. Zoe, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Colin was clearly unhinged, and I was terrified. Instinctively retreating. Get away from me, I rasped, my voice barely audible. After Colin left, I collapsed to the floor, my mind racing with worry about my parents and Andrew. To prevent me from escaping, Colin hired a caretaker to watch over me. He knew I resisted him, but he didn't force himself on me. Instead, he insisted on having meals together every day, acting like a complete madman. I don't want to eat, I muttered, tossing the spoon aside and standing up to go upstairs. Zoe, don't you want to hear the truth from 3 years ago? Chapter 10. I raised an eyebrow but didn't return to my room. 3 years ago. That post on my moments was just the result of a bet I lost. I blocked you from seeing it because I didn't want you to find out. I never imagined Lisa would show it to you, Colin said, his eyes filled with regret. And as for the photo, it was because she accidentally spilled something on her clothes. I just grabbed one of your shirts for her to change into. Nothing more. And then? I admit, I liked Lisa before, but after we got married, I didn't have feelings for her anymore. Once I realized she was behind those things, I cut ties with her completely. We haven't spoken since. Colin finished speaking and looked at me with sincerity, as if afraid I wouldn't believe him. But he never understood that those 2 incidents were just the triggers. What truly disappointed me was his repeated indifference. The year you broke up with Lisa, you confessed to me out of spite, and we became a couple. Now, all those ridiculous memories no longer meant anything to me. I loved you, so I gave everything I had, without holding back. But you were always distant. The keychain Lisa gave you was something you cherished, and when I accidentally touched it, you acted like I had tainted it. Colin opened his mouth to refute, but I stopped him and continued. The day Lisa returned to the country, you left me waiting just to pick her up. And on my birthday, just because she said she felt unwell, you rushed to her side and left me standing alone on the street. You'll never know how cold that winter was. I'm sorry, Colin. I'm not a fool. I could clearly feel that you never really cared about me. Now you say you love me? Don't you think it's too late and too shameless? I only love Andrew now. To me, you're just someone who passed through my life, Stop, Zoe. Please stop. Colin's eyes filled with tears, unable to listen any longer. He hurried out. Chapter 11. After saying all that, Colin disappeared for several days. In an effort to gain some freedom, I started getting close to the housekeeper. Auntie, I just want to let my parents know I'm safe, I said, putting on some makeup to make myself look as miserable as possible. Auntie, you're a mother too. If you were in this situation, wouldn't you be worried? Sensing her growing sympathy, I repeatedly reassured her. I swear, Auntie, I won't make things difficult for you. Just let me borrow your phone to check in with my parents. Go ahead and make the call. The housekeeper was wary and didn't want to leave. I put on my most pleasant expression. Could you please turn around? Auntie, I feel uncomfortable making calls while being watched. Once I got the phone, I waited for a moment when the housekeeper wasn't paying attention and knocked her out with an object nearby. It was the first time I had ever done something like that, and my hands were trembling with sweat. After calling the police, I rushed outside, only to find that there were security measures in place everywhere, making it impossible for me to escape. I dialed Andrew's number when I heard his voice on the other end. I whispered, Andrew, it's me, Zoe. Where are you? Hearing Andrew's voice after 2 weeks finally calmed my anxious heart. Just as I gave him the address of the villa, I felt a hand grab my arm. Turning around, I saw Colin, furious. He snatched the phone from my hand and threw it far into the distance, where it quickly disappeared from sight. Colin, you're insane. I shoved him away and ran to find the phone. He grabbed my arm, holding me in place. Zoe, you're so cruel. Right back at you. Since I had been caught, there was no need to be polite anymore. Well, since you put it that way, I suppose I'll have to do something about it. Colin forced my head down and tried to kiss me. Get away from me. If you touch me, I will never forgive you. Not even in death. The resolve in my voice made Colin freeze. He clutched his head in agony, as if haunted by a painful memory, afraid he might lose control. I tried to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. Don't think for a second that Andrew is going to come save you. He tied me up and threw me into the car, driving away from the villa. Colin, you've already committed a crime. Stop the car now. Looking at the deranged man before me, my fear hit its peak. This time, you're mine, Colin said, his tone filled with despair and darkness. Seeing how reckless he had become, my fear only deepened. Chapter 12. Colin took me to a small cabin in the middle of nowhere. At that moment, he was especially dangerous, and I hid in a corner, trying my best not to provoke him. As night fell, Colin tossed me a piece of bread. Seeing that I hadn't touched it, he snapped, Relax. I'm not going to drug the bread. I stared at the candle flickering nearby and, on the verge of breaking down, pleaded, Colin, I'm begging you, let me go. He didn't respond, and the room fell into silence. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard him muttering softly, If I let you go, who will let me go? He came over to me, touching my face gently. Seeing that I didn't react, he began quietly revealing his so-called secrets. I've been restraining myself so much, but why do you always choose Andrew? Is he really that much better than me? Every time I wake up, you've already left me behind. I don't understand why fate keeps making me start over but never gives me a real chance. He crouched down and kissed my hand, fearing I'd be discovered. I suppressed my disgust and let him hold me as we slept through the night. When I woke up the next morning, Colin was nowhere to be seen. I hurried outside to check the surroundings, realizing we were in the middle of nowhere with no villages or towns nearby. I squatted down in frustration, cursing Colin in my heart 100 times over. Soon enough, Colin returned. The moment he saw me, he pulled me tightly into his arms, pleading, Zoe, can't you have a little pity for me? I remained silent. By now, Colin had become so obsessive and deranged that it didn't matter whether I said anything or not. I truly love you. I've tried to give you up before, but those memories are just too deep. I can't forget them no matter what. Zoe, can't you just look at me? No, I coldly refused. Hearing my response, Colin let go of me. I pointed to my chest and said seriously, This heart is too small. It can't hold two people. I only love Andrew now. Maybe you do love me now. But we've already missed our chance. A love that was never meant to be isn't worth you breaking the law for. After saying that, I walked away, leaving Colin to think for himself. Chapter 13. Even though I had made myself clear, Colin still refused to let go. He kept me trapped here, living each day in some delusional fantasy. Crossing my arms, I tried once again to reason with him. The outside world must be in chaos by now. Aren't you worried that the Lin family will get dragged into this? For you, I don't care about any of that, Colin said, gazing at me with deep affection. I felt so uncomfortable that I could only lower my head and remain silent. Zoe, you remind me of how you were in school. You had a bit of baby fat back then, and every time I saw you, I wanted to pinch your cheeks. Colin started reminiscing about the past. When we were dating, I didn't really focus on you. Maybe it was because of my arrogance or because of Lisa, but I was pretty awful. I looked around, pretending not to hear him. Compared to Lisa, the Zoe from back then really was ordinary, so ordinary that you wouldn't notice her in a crowd. No wonder Colin hadn't cared much about me at the time. Zoe, can I tell you a secret? Before I could respond, he blurted out, I've actually lived through this life once already. This is my second time. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, but when I realized what he was saying, it felt absurd. You've got to be kidding me. What kind of nonsense are you spouting in the middle of the night? That's really creepy. I crossed my arms tighter, nervously scanning the room. Zoe, I'm not making this up. He stared into the distance, a brief flicker of sadness in his eyes. In the original timeline, because I didn't understand my feelings in time, I had to watch you and Andrew live happily with children and grandchildren, while I ended up dying alone. I hesitated, afraid that asking the wrong question might push him over the edge. You had a son and a daughter. You were so happy, he said, as if reading my thoughts. I cleared my throat, trying to draw more out of him. And what about the first time you were reborn? The first time. Colin closed his eyes, as if the memory was too painful to relive. Zoe, I'm a bit tired. I'll tell you about the first time another day. With that, he turned away and fell asleep, ignoring me. Chapter 14. Although I was curious if Colin had made up his mind not to talk, there was nothing I could do about it. That night, Colin was unusually quiet. I was woken up by the sound of police sirens. When I opened my eyes and saw Andrew, the person I had been longing to see day and night, I smiled and threw myself into his arms. Andrew, I missed you so much. I'm here to take you home. Andrew knelt down and helped me put on my shoes. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I asked in confusion, how did you find me? Andrew stiffened for a moment before answering. Colin turned himself in. That's how we were able to find this place. Andrew stared at me. He's already been taken to the police car. He didn't want you to see him in such a miserable state. But he asked me to give you this letter. He said it has the answers you're looking for. I took the letter from Andrew's hand and let him hold mine as we left. In the car, Andrew turned to look out the window while I opened the letter. As I read about Colin's first rebirth, I finally understood why he had been so reluctant to talk about it. Both of Colin's rebirths happened after we got divorced. In his first rebirth, driven by resentment, Colin used forceful and manipulative tactics. He set Andrew up and forced him out of my life. Then, he threatened my parents to make me stay with him. But on the day of our wedding, news came that Andrew had died. And in that world, I came to hate Colin completely. Later, my parents passed away one after the other, and I followed Andrew in death. Colin was left to live a life full of regret. In his second rebirth, Colin initially intended to compete with Andrew fairly, but the memories from his first life had affected him deeply. He became increasingly volatile, prideful yet insecure, controlled yet prone to rage, constantly swinging between extremes. In the final part of the letter, Colin wrote that this was his punishment from the heavens. God gave him countless chances to start over, only to make him experience the pain of loss again and again. Chapter 15. Colin was sentenced to 6 years for kidnapping. Clara tried to help him, but Colin refused, and I heard he also turned down all visitors. When I returned, I told Andrew everything. Except for the part about Colin's rebirth. That part was just too unbelievable. I couldn't agree with what Colin had done, but I couldn't deny that everything started because of me. All I could hope for was that Colin would live a better life after his release. To make it up to me, Andrew held another wedding. This time, there was no Colin, no unwanted guests. It was just me and Andrew, finally stepping into the life we had dreamed of. Thanks to Andrew's talents, the dessert shop was doing very well. After resting for a month, I started applying for jobs again. In the spring of our second year of marriage, I unexpectedly got pregnant. Around the time of the Lunar New Year that same year, a chubby little girl was born. Time passed quickly, and soon it was Colin's release day. That day, Clara, whom I hadn't seen in years, suddenly showed up. She looked haggard, a far cry from her once proud and imposing demeanor. "Zoe, Colin doesn't want to come out. Could you help me talk to him?" I watched my energetic daughter and didn't agree. If he doesn't want to leave, no one can change his mind. If 6 years weren't enough for him to let go, he might as well stay there. My words were harsh, but if Colin hadn't moved on, he was still a threat to me. I held my daughter's hand, ready to leave, but the little girl, for some reason, took an interest in Clara and offered her a piece of candy. How sweet. If we hadn't schemed against you and Colin back then. This child. Clara trailed off when she saw my expression change, quickly stopping herself. No wonder Colin resented her. Everyone had thought Lisa was the mastermind, but it turned out Clara had been involved too. "Lady, I can't do anything about your brother. I have my own family now, and I don't want you or anyone else to disrupt our lives." Chapter 16. A month later, Colin was released from prison. He came all the way to find me, insisting that we talk. In the park, I looked at Colin with his close-cropped hair, feeling as if a lifetime had passed. "Do you have any plans?" I waved to my daughter playing in the distance. Colin didn't answer. He just stared at my child, saying, "She looks a lot like you." "She's very cute." I smiled, watching Andrew and our daughter playing in the distance. "She only looks like me on the outside. Her personality is exactly like Andrew's." Colin tore his gaze away from the child and said, "During my time in prison, I felt at peace, but now that I'm out and seeing you again, that old feeling of resentment is coming back." His sharp eyes locked onto me. I was startled and instinctively stepped back. "Zoe, do you think I still have a chance to start over?" Colin asked calmly. Although Colin wasn't as unhinged as before, I could see he hadn't fully moved on, fearing he might spiral again and cause harm. I tried to reason with him. "You need to let go. The only reason you're still so troubled is that you're holding on to this obsession too tightly. You say it's the gods punishing you, but maybe it's really you punishing yourself. Only by letting go can you start your own life. Clinging to the past. Aren't you also punishing me?" "Colin, this self-righteous love of yours has only caused me distress." Colin seemed to ponder my words. "Zoe, I'm sorry." After saying that, he left quietly. I watched him walk away, feeling a mix of emotions. Andrew came up beside me, his gaze following Colin's retreating figure. He frowned. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing. Just some casual conversation." Seeing Andrew's worried expression, I quickly asked, "What's wrong?" Andrew shook his head. "I don't know. I just feel like he's lost all will to live. But maybe I'm overthinking it." I thought Andrew was just saying it in passing, but I never expected his words to come true. The next day, just as I was about to go to work, Clara called, saying Colin was gone. At first, I didn't understand, until she mentioned the letter. He took a large amount of sleeping pills. By the time we found him, it was too late. Clara sobbed as she explained how Colin had died. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "Zoe." In his letter, Colin wrote that he was starting a new life. Do you know what that means? Maybe this was the best ending for him. There would be no third rebirth. Colin had finally found his way out, and I no longer had to endure any more of this tragedy. Extra chapter. After Colin and Zoe divorced, he began dating Lisa. Lisa thought Colin was still the same devoted simp who would indulge her every whim and constantly made unreasonable demands. At first, Colin would tolerate her, but after a while, he grew impatient. Things came to a head when Lisa decided to throw away all of Zoe's belongings without asking, which prompted Colin to slap her. Colin, I am your girlfriend now. You and Zoe are in the past. How could you hit me because of her? Lisa, feeling wronged, started to make a scene. I've told you before, no one touches her things, Colin replied, putting a cigarette to his lips. But then, as if something crossed his mind, he stopped himself from lighting it. Stung by his words, Lisa stormed into Colin's room, grabbed a pile of Zoe's belongings, and started tossing them into the trash. Zoe's married now. Who are you trying to upset by doing this? The way you're acting. She'd just find it pathetic. Lisa, Colin's voice was stern, a clear warning. He pulled Zoe's things out of the trash bin, not caring if they were dirty, and wiped them off with his hands as if they were treasures. Seeing that Colin's eyes were filled with thoughts of someone else, Lisa pressed him relentlessly, demanding an explanation. Are you regretting it? Regretting divorcing Zoe? Regretting dating me? Yes, I regret it. At that moment, Colin finally realized who he truly cared about. It was Zoe. It was the Zoe who knitted scarves for him, the Zoe who waited outside his dorm like a fool, the Zoe who scolded him for smoking too much. But he had already lost her. A cat's meow broke the silence, and Colin, with a bitter smile, picked up Daisy, cradling her in his arms. He told Lisa to pack her things and leave. Colin, do you know why Zoe divorced you? Lisa, by now completely unhinged, screamed, because it was all your sister's doing. She never liked Zoe and orchestrated all those so-called coincidences. Your beloved sister drove away the person you cared about, and you never even realized it. In the end, you were the biggest fool. Colin turned pale at her words. He kicked Lisa out and immediately booked a flight to the city where Zoe lived. Colin waited outside for hours until he finally saw Zoe, arm in arm with Andrew, laughing and talking. They didn't notice Colin standing in the distance. At that moment, Colin finally understood Zoe truly no longer had feelings for him. He had taken the wrong path, and by the time he found his way back, everything had already changed. Colin left this world with his heart full of obsession. When he woke up again, it was the moment right after his divorce from Zoe. He thought that his unwavering love had moved the gods and given him another chance at life. But what he didn't realize was that this was just the beginning of a new tragedy.